Hi students. We're in lesson 1 here, video 1B. 1A was on YouTube, why we should take stats instead of calculus. So let's start from the beginning here. Start of the class, Math 127. Whenever we're thinking of a statistical investigation, we're solving problems by collecting data, we really need to think about the context or the story behind the data. Okay. Now, one way to think about this is like a journalist. We want to note all the important facts about the data we've collected or we have found. And so for every problem, make sure that we can always be thinking about, we'll call them the 6 W's, even though one starts with the letter H. And we'll go through these one at a time, but we have to be thinking about the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and the how. All right, so the who and the what. Those are the two most important ones, so we'll spend more details and time speaking of those. So who, what, when, where, the why, and the how. Who are we collecting data on? What are we collecting data on? When was it collected? Where was it collected? How was it collected? And why? Right? All this background information will help us make good decisions. Right. The one that's hardest for students to put into words, and probably instructors as well, is the who. And the who is what you're collecting data on. So every time we're collecting data to run a statistical investigation, we'll be collecting data on something. If we think back to the McDonald's example that we talked about in the first day of class, what was the who? What am I collecting data on? It was each order of small fries. Right? So for McDonald's, the who was each order of small fries. And there were some characteristics that came with each order of small fries. We'll get to that in a few slides, but that was the what. Okay? The who is what we're collecting data on. There's a second one in the notes. This comes from that Hans Rosling video that we watched the first day in class, 200 countries in 200 years, and identify the who. Okay, so we think about it. What are we collecting data on? It was each country, right? Each country. Hans had data from each country. There were some variables that he collected, things like lifespan, among others. And so those will be the variables. We'll get to that in just a bit. But the who for this one is each country. There are a few words we can think about to describe the who. All of these are appropriate. They're sort of synonymous. When thinking about a data set, the who corresponds to, we could call it cases. We could call them individuals. We could call observations. Right, so when students went to McDonald's and got their order of fries, we could call each order of fries a case in that data set, or an observation, or even an individual. One word sometimes sounds better than the others, but they're all correct in all cases. Okay. In a statistics class, the what are the variables? Now, if you're coming from an algebra background, you might think of variables as like the letter X or the letter Y in an algebraic expression. But in a statistics course, variables have a very different meaning. And definitely think of the root word. What's the root word of variables? The root word is vary, which in statistics we're studying variation. And variables are things that vary or change from case to case or individual to individual. In statistics, the variables are the characteristics recorded for each individual. If we think back to the McDonald's example, what were the things students were writing down in the notebook, right? Well, let's think about this. I believe Remember, we set students on a different day of the week, so students wrote down the day of the week. in the notebook. They also wrote the time that they got their order of fries, probably the date, okay? So some background information. And the main thing we were measuring was also a variable. It was the fry weight. So weight. This is one of the variables. This changes from order to order. And finally, we looked at 3 different locations. We looked at Rising Sun, Elkton, and Northeast. So they wrote down location as well. Day, time, dates, weight, location. These are the things that change from order to order. These are the variables. And in terms of this journalistic approach to thinking about our data, these would be the what's. All right, there's the second one. I think we'll go back to the Hans Rosling. For the Hans Rosling video, 200 countries in 200 years, identify the what's, what changed from country to country. What he was looking at, for each country he recorded income. For each country, Hans recorded lifespan. So remember, he was looking at the relationship between, as a country's income goes up, what tends to happen to lifespan. And the last variable, a little bit of a tricky one, but in the background, he was looking at this data over a period of time, right? So they were looking year by year. So that would be another variable. The what's, these are the variables, and these change from country to country. Income, lifespan, and year. The who, again, is what we're collecting data on, would be each country. These are the variables. All right. Looks like one more page in this lesson. Let me flip the slide here. In statistics, typically, in this day and age, you're going to be using software to analyze your data. There's not a lot of hand calculations, lucky for us, and there's not a lot of making graphs by hands. The software that we'll use is called StatCrunch, and we'll mainly use StatCrunch in class. You're probably at home watching this video, so we just want to give you a basic rundown of understanding how the data gets loaded into the software. This looks like Microsoft Excel. If you're familiar with Excel, it's a spreadsheet package designed specifically for statistics. Okay, and the who and what comes into play in terms of how I load the data in, right? Each row. So think of a spreadsheet, and you've got rows and you've got columns, right? Each row is going to be an individual. So you're going to put the who in rows. For the McDonald's example, every row in StatCrunch would be one student's order of fries. Okay? And so we sort of know what's going to happen here, right? Each column corresponds to a variable. We'll put the variables in columns. Now, without specifically looking at StatCrunch, it might be a little bit difficult to imagine this, but get this in the notes for now. We're going to practice a ton in class. The variables go in columns, and the who or the observations will go into the rows. All right, there is a quick example in the notes. I hope this is showing up on our video here. When these slides were written, it was fantasy football season. Right at the beginning on ESPN.com, fantasy football data is presented in the following table. And when I was writing the slide, I was getting ready for my fantasy football season, and I was looking up players, and I said, holy cow, this is like a perfect example to look at the who and the what. Here's Adrian Peterson, 2013. This is the year we were coming up on. And for this problem, we're supposed to identify the who and the what. Didn't leave myself a lot of space to write, so I'll just say it and take some good notes. But remember, the who correspond to rows. So for this problem, what am I collecting data on? It's the football players, right? Here's a football player in the first row. It's Adrian Peterson. This is one observation. This is one case. Arian Foster, Marshawn Lynch, Ray Rice, etc. These are the who's. Each row is a who, and I can squeak it up here, right? The who are the players. That's what I'm collecting data on. Okay. The whats are the variables. Variables are characteristics that change from player to player. And it's in the columns. If I loaded this into StatCrunch, it would look exactly the same, except it wouldn't have this nice picture and all these nice graphics. The bye week for the player. This is one variable. How many points they're expected to score. This is another variable. COM is completions. This is another variable. Attempts. PAYD is passing yards, I guess. Passing touchdowns. Sort of strange. These are all running backs, and they have a bunch of quarterback statistics showing up on my slide. But each column is a what. These are the variables, so identify the whats. I know this isn't going to show up, but bye week, points, completions, blah, 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 all the way down. There's probably 30 more of these. They just didn't show up on the slide. Those are the variables. Those are the whats. All right. I guess I did leave myself room to write all this. You probably wrote this in the notes already. I'll quickly get it on the slide, so in case you missed that, the who are the players, and there's so many of them. Can I just say that each column is a whats? I mean, we had bye week, and I'll just take the lazy man's way out, and I'll say bye week, etc. This is where this video ends. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.